happy to welcome Andrew Biggio. I have just finished, as of yesterday, The Rifle 2, Back to the Battlefield. Read the rifle, then read the rifle 2. You will not be disappointed if you follow my wise advice. How are you?
Good, brother. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Now, what is your background before we get started? You're a veteran, of course, police officer, now author, run a nonprofit, you do all sorts of stuff. But when and where did you serve?
Yes, I was a U.S. Marine from 2006 to 2012. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and as an infantryman. And I got out, attended college. Wanted to still serve. Became a police officer in 2014, and have been chasing my dream, kind of just wanting to be a cop and be a military veteran. I guess I didn't know, or maybe I did know how long the acquiring the title veteran would stay with me, and I've been trying to do the most I can to give back to other veterans whose service may have altered their entire lives. So in 2013, I started my own nonprofit to help those that were severely wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan with devastating injuries like losing arms and legs and being burned or paralyzed. And every year I do a large motorcycle charity ride and donate hundreds of $1,000s directly to those Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen who have been catastrophically injured or wounded during after post 9/11.
Yeah, and this book, it's really inspired because I have been going through, before we hit record, I've been going through a lot of World War II history. And I guess, I learned about World War II by sitting with my dad watching documentaries in the History Channel, because that's what dads do. You you watch all these documentaries. And he grew up, I think when it started, he was like 8 years old. So he was in this weird in-between war generation. But the Pacific I was very spotty on, so I've been reading all these war diaries, and it is really amazing to see not only there's a commonality of experience, even when you read a biography or war diary of an enemy, there's a lot of similarities, but the differences in what happens when they return, how some people are left scarred, how other people just are somehow, either they keep it quiet or they put it behind him, lead a completely different life. And just the object that you bring around, this old M1 Garand rifle, I just love the reaction of so many of the veterans you talk to, whose just eyes light up. It's not, oh, Grandpa, how are you dealing with the pain? You just hand them the tool that they were stuck in the mud and blood with, and their faces light up. It was such a pivotal moment in life. How many signatures do you have on that rifle?
I'm at about 320 names of different veterans, male, female, Medal of Honor recipients, cooks, submariners, infantrymen, airmen, Coast Guardsmen. I wanted to represent the whole war on this rifle by having them sign their name on it. And now you can barely make out the wood stock of it because it's completely covered in white signatures.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a great way to quote unquote mess up that rifle. It's just fantastic. More recently, well, first off, what was the reaction to the first book? Because it sounds like it was a big hit. I didn't read it till recently, but did it pretty much blow you away? Because it really went viral, went all over the place.
Yeah, I'm very proud of myself with that, of one of my accomplishments in life. And the biggest thing is all I wanted was the approval first of the veterans I wrote about, and then
Yeah.
secondly of the veterans I served with, and I got the approval of both. And then of course everyone else, I wanted their good opinions on it too. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback, a lot of 5-star reviews on Amazon, and I want Rifle 2 to be the same.
Yeah. Everybody go read it. It's fantastic, and it really broadens the scope of people who work to support folks. Maybe my favorite, just because it cracked me up, was the Coast Guard veteran who talked about a girl in every port, and then he's living in a nursing home, and all the ladies are flocking around him still at 102 or whatever that was. I'm like, that guy's awesome. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good to see these people who are kind of I don't know, forgotten's the right word, but a lot of times people who are supporting the people doing the fighting do a lot of amazing things. But you also show it isn't kind of this rah-rah, glitzy, Hollywooded up. It's war is hell. They say that for a reason, folks. It is brutal and devastating, and death and maimings and people dealing with missing limbs later on. I know going back to my dad, he had a boss when I was a kid who fought in the Pacific. And I asked my dad, oh, where did he fight? And he's like, he doesn't talk about it. And I remember being a kid, he invited me and my dad over to his house once. And my dad, on the way there, he's like, don't mention anything to do with Japan. Don't mention Hondas and Toyotas. I'm like, kind of, why would I mention those things? But my dad was up to buy a car and he was thinking of getting a Honda, and his boss just chewed him out, and you can't do that. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, yeah, he never talks about it, but he saw some stuff, and that
Yeah,
stuff sticks with you.
right.
Yeah. And what about the cross generational? Because that's one thing I loved about both of your books on this is people who might feel alienated from our culture. They fought in Fallujah. They fought at Tora Bora. They come home, and for a while it's yay troops, and then it's like, oh, okay, the new fashion is not to really care for troops, not to care for cops, not to care for these people, and it's just popularity comes and goes. What was the effect on current veterans who might feel a little bit lost and say, hey, your grandparents, they're here for you?
You know, and I was one of those veterans. You know, I felt as
Mm-hmm.
though you know, and I think subconsciously I just thought that like, well, I'm nothing compared to the World War II veterans, and I got to hide in their shadows. And then, of course, after the fall of Afghanistan, it became more evident that my war wasn't as popular and great as their war was, even though my 9/11 was kind of our Pearl Harbor, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought we'd be on the same playing field as these guys. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way, you know, historically, and it won't be depicted that way in movies and books and Hollywood. And so, when I'm sitting across, though, from these World War II veterans, they don't necessarily think that they're the greatest generation and their war was good versus evil. They really taught me that war wasn't black and white.
Yeah.
Um, that they did some not so great things to win World War II. You know, the greatest
Mm-hmm.
generation did some seriously not so great things to conquer these countries that they were fighting, and stuff today that would put our troops in jail. Those guys got away with it back then like it was nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
they really normalized war for me, and also let me know like the secret lives they all had, kind of guys that came home and became
Mm-hmm.
alcoholics, guys that came home went to jail, guys that came home and their kids never talked to them again because they were so mean and abusive, and all the stuff that was kind of swept under the rug during the World War II era, that we bring light on today because of more organizations and nonprofits that acknowledge PTSD and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth. So but it took me to sit in front of 300 World War II veterans who have lived long, successful lives after combat, after they've come home and uh, had those hurdles that they had to get over and square away their life and get sober or get, you know, this mental health they need and things like that. I think for them to reach almost 100 years old and their keys to success on how they did it are important for young veterans and civilians who have experienced trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think appeals to veterans too, because before we started recording, I mentioned, my heroic service in the Great Cold War was turning dials and checking out meters at the back end of a submarine. And excuse my dog walking through. He's making his regular podcast appearance. But one thing that really strikes too is you read about these guys from World War II. You read about your experience. Just the military culture. It's like, wow, everybody's the same. Just the lingo, the jokes, the gallows humor. That's part of it that I look back at, and I just served one tour of duty, no big deal. But it's like, man, those were pretty special times, and those were pretty special guys. And it's just weird to see people across the generations doing kind of the same thing, same sense of humor, same frustrations, same maddening experiences with HQ. So is that something that kind of blew you away as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I've also learned the value and importance of everyone's MOS and job and what it took to win World War II, the whole thing. And I've had so many World War II veterans say to me, "Well, I only did this, or I didn't see combat." And then it's I want to represent everybody on this historic rifle.
Oh, sorry, mic issues. It's also awesome to see. I'm in Arizona. I'm in the Phoenix area, but talking to the Mohawk code talker, and like you, I was unaware there was any other tribes involved, but Navajos, but also visiting the res and growing up in Arizona too. It's something
Mhm.
every year we heard about the code talkers on the local news and stuff. It's awesome to see them honored. Japanese Americans who just did heroic work, especially in Italy. African Americans who went out there, saved people's lives, came back often, but not always, but often were treated like garbage when they returned. So it's good to just kind of show the wide variety of experiences that people had. And kind of the e pluribus unum concept is just like, yeah, we're all in this together, folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the journey's been unmatched for me.
Yeah, it has to be amazing. Was there a few times you mentioned people being skeptical? You always have the scammers ripping off old folks and stuff like that. Was it kind of tough to get the confidence of these guys who don't know you from Adam and you kind of walk in? How is that? Just kind of getting their approval, I guess, and their family's approval.
Yeah, I take having the veterans contacts seriously. There were some veterans where I had to write letters to, print out photos, mail them, then drive hundreds of miles to meet them, to get into their house, to get these interviews that had never been told before. Um, and then for someone to say, "Oh, hey, can I have so and so's phone number? I want to do an interview too." Or, "Hey, can I have this?" It's like, well, do you have any idea what it took for me to get their contact information? Not only that, but like also I need to protect their privacy. Just because they let me interview them or tell their story doesn't mean they're welcoming a whole assembly line of people that want to interview them.
Yeah,
And that and or bother them or talk about blood and guts and things like that. So I had to read after action reports, pull from World War II, pull names out, Google them, try to find an obituary, try to find a grave. If I didn't find either of those, assume they're still alive, then write a letter to their last known address or call on the phone. I mean, this was a lot of extensive work.
yeah, absolutely. It was a ton of work for you to do, and just kind of the emotional appeal of dealing with these people. You're not only saying, "Hey, I want to buy a chicken dinner," you're saying, "Hey, tell me these dark, horrible memories from 70 years earlier that you've never really talked about to anyone. You kind of hid from your wife, you hid from your kids to kind of spare them the pain." So yeah, really remarkable thing that you did here, talking to these folks. And kind of how do you deal with, we got Veterans Day coming up, November 11. And one thing that's weird, I've joked with some of my old buddies about it who, like me, we did our duty and we're done. And that was it. Didn't fight any wars, didn't have any sacrifices, whined about the chow. That's those are my battle stories.
Mhm.
But so it's always kind of odd on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, since civilians don't really differentiate the two. They think they're the same thing. But you'll be at a Sunday church service and, hey, why don't all the veterans stand up? And I never want to stand up. And then sometimes they force you to, and you're like, the only people who matter is the people who didn't come back or the people who actually were in action. And it's kind of crazy because I've talked to people who are in the Great War on Terror, they were in Iraq, they were in Afghanistan. I'm like, how do you handle it? It must be easier for you because you were in it, man. You were in it. They're like, oh no, I always try to hide in the back because it seems like every veteran's like, no, not me, that other guy. That's who matters. Don't honor me because I had it easy. I came back often in one piece. But it's just crazy how the kind of humility of being in such a violent situation breeds in people.
Yeah, I mean, there was always two kinds of veterans. I feel like there was veterans that feel like they never did enough, and then veterans that feel like they did too much.
Oh yeah.
And I'm one of those guys who feel like they didn't do enough, you know. And
Mhm.
when I read stories about Medal of Honor recipients or guys losing their legs and still calling in air support, and
Yeah.
those are the people you want to be acknowledged and should be held on a pedestal on Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And I do feel like that a lot, but at the same time now I think that I've been out for 13, 14 years, and I'm a Boston police officer now, and I see younger
Mhm.
veterans coming home and joining the force that never deployed anywhere. Never, I still want to thank them for their service, and I still appreciate them just as much as I appreciate a combat veteran because they're still answering the call. They're still serving. Yeah, sure, they didn't choose where they were sent or what they did, but at least in this day and age with where this country is, these guys at least stepped up and signed the dotted line.
Yeah. Now, what advice would you give, coming up to Veterans Day, but just in daily life? You see the guy with the Korean War ball cap at the mall, or you run into, for some reason, I run into vets at gas stations and I have no idea why, but the Vietnam vet, if you get the rare pleasure, the World War II vet, for civilians out there, what do you think they should do? Do they approach them? Do they leave them alone? How do you think veterans appreciate being dealt with?
Oh, I think they definitely appreciate just, thank you for your service. Nice to meet you. Or I think that's, a lot of veterans think especially a lot of conservative guys think there's no hope in society and they watch
Yeah.
their whole every day watching the news
Mhm.
and having the new, depending on which news channel you're watching, stream that, our country and high schools aren't teaching kids about history and and things like that. And the fact that there's barely any more, a lot of American Legion posts and VFW posts that have closed down because there's so few veterans. So it's nice for them to get acknowledged that people still care about their sacrifice and the awareness of the time they served.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because when I'll do that, just a quick thank you for your service. Every one of them, especially the old dudes, but every one of them stops what they're doing, stares into your eyes, and says thank you.
Mhm.
It's a very meaningful thing. And also, if you see cops eating at the Chinese place when you're doing your pickup, say thanks to them as well. They do not get enough respect in this culture, especially over the past decade or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, just these are the people willing to give their life to protect yours, and you don't even know their names. So least you can do is say thank you to them. Well, why don't you tell us lastly just about the nonprofit you're doing? One pretty cool, amazing thing is being able to bring back some of these veterans back to the battlefields, especially in Europe, seeing the place, or maybe they lost their best friend and still are gutted about it. Has that been a pretty amazing experience?
Yes, I mean, it has become a new addiction. About 75% of the World War II veterans I was interviewing had never been back to where they served. And to me, it was mind blowing that the places that are on yours and I's bucket list, right? Like
Uh-huh.
Paris, France, Rome, Italy, Amsterdam, these veterans have never been back. And especially
Mhm.
being an East Coast veteran where you can just get on an airplane and take a direct flight to any of these places, the fact that they never have always blew my mind. And now that they were retired and some of them have outlived their spouses and they're at home, I asked, will you go back? Would you want to go back now with me and a couple other younger veterans? And the fact that they would all say yes was just amazing. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I have taken over 30 World War II veterans back to Holland, Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Germany. I've shown them where they fought. They've showed me where they fought, showed them, located their foxholes, the homes they took refuge in, linked them up with German veterans to make peace, introduced them to civilians who survived the war as children. And it's just been remarkable, remarkable. I never thought. I'd be living my lifelong dream like this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Andrew Biggio, everybody go out, get the Rifle 2, Back to the Battlefield. If you haven't yet, check out the Rifle 1. Get the audiobook, listening to it instead of podcast. As soon as you finish this podcast, download the audiobooks and listen to that instead of listening to any more podcasts, let's say. Where can people find the book, find the nonprofits, find more about you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at The Rifle, Facebook The Rifle, and my website is theworldwar2rifle.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for your service, not only as a Marine, not only as a guy collecting these stories, but also as a police officer, protecting me and my family. I appreciate it. Everybody get the book. Great to have you on.
Very nice. Thank you.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.